My name's Hester Barron and I'm a lecturer in history at the University of Sussex, and I work on British society and politics in the first half of the 20th century. I'm going to be looking today at living standards and regional and social differences in living standards between 1918 and 1939. What are the images you think of when you think of the interwar years? Long queues of men waiting to collect the dole, perhaps. Hunger marches, maybe the Jarrow March. Children playing in dirty back lanes in smoky, dirty terrace streets. Maybe. Or perhaps you think of other images which are about enjoyment, which are about the spending of money, the building of new picture palaces, cinemas, Gracie Fields, George Formby, Blackpool holidays. The official picture of Britain promoted by the government in the interwar years was one of a Britain that was modern and forward-looking, a place of rising prosperity and increasingly high standards of living. It was an image of imperial and domestic self-confidence that was promoted at the British Empire exhibition held at Wembley in 1924, for example. Following the trauma of World War I, the government pointed to the success of its own social welfare programmes, such as the setting up of school meals in schools, the establishment of maternity and child welfare clinics, and the extension of unemployment insurance for those out of work. Key to claims of success was the continuously declining rate of infant mortality, which is often taken as a key indicator of a society's well-being. In England and Wales, infant mortality declined from 83 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1921 to 66 deaths per 1,000 20 years later. But not everyone shared the government's optimism. Other social commentators, novelists and statisticians painted a much bleaker picture, particularly as the Depression really began to bite in the 1930s. Fenner Brockway's Hungry England of 1932 and George Orwell's Road to Wigan Pier of 1937 were just two of many social investigations of the time, while Rowntree's more scientific survey of York in 1936 found that 6.8% of the city's population were living in what he labelled primary poverty, his most deprived category. And officially York wasn't even designated as a particularly bad area. Meanwhile, a series of novels, most famously Walter Greenwood's Love on the Dole, published in 1933, provided harrowing accounts of the social consequences of unemployment. But this doesn't mean that the official picture of Britain was necessarily wrong, just that it was selective, and that averages can be deceptive. Yeah. People's experiences were actually enormously varied during the interwar years and depended upon regional and social factors. And this is perhaps most famously represented in a commentary written by the writer J.B. Priestley. In 1933, Priestley travelled around England and he recorded his experiences in a book that he entitled English Journey. In it, he said that he discovered 3 different kinds of England. The first was the traditional Old England of literature and history books. Priestley described the country and the cathedrals and the ministers and manor houses and inns of parson and squire. The second England that he said he'd found was the bleak 19th century England. He described this as the industrial England of coal, iron, steel, cotton, wool, railways, of thousands of rows of little houses all alike, a cynically devastated countryside, sooty, dismal little towns, and still sootier, grim, fortress-like cities. His third England was the newest England. It was one of consumption and prosperity, albeit that Priestley argues that the side effect to this was a certain sense of soullessness. This, he said, is the England of arterial and bypass roads, filling stations, giant cinemas and dance halls and cafes, bungalows with tiny garages, cocktail bars, factory girls looking like actresses, and everything given away for cigarette coupons. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the way that experiences varied in the interwar years, and the contrast was such that at times it did seem as though people were living in different nations. I'm going to look at divisions resulting from occupation and region first, then from social class, and finally gender.